Hello, my name is Dave Carrig. Today I am announcing my independent candidacy for the United States Senate in 1986.
Dave who? Why aren't the candidates for U.S. Senate in 1986 the Republican incumbent, Alphonse D'Amato, the Nader's Raider, who says he's the real Democrat, Mark Green, and the millionaire who says he has the real record, John Dyson? Well, add another name, Dave Carrig, who depicts himself as the real populist.
I believe that this campaign is necessary to allow the unrepresented majority an opportunity to elect one of its own to the government of this nation.
The government of this nation, according to Carrig, is dominated by the wrong people.
Lawyers and millionaires have more than sufficient representation in the Senate. Working people have virtually none.
Dave Carrig considers himself a working person. He makes his living as an independent building contractor and lives with his wife Kristen and their 3 sons in rural Herkimer County. Carrig earned a bachelor's degree from the State University College at Brockport and was on his way to becoming a successful salesman for a large corporation in Florida when he decided to leave the fast track and return home to bring up his family where they could be in touch with the land and the values he knew growing up. We decided to visit him at home to look at the problems of a political outsider trying to get in. Inside Albany intern Betsy Sykes asked Carrig why this race at this time.
I'm involved in this because I want to make a difference. I want to try and do something to make things better. And I've been waiting for a long time for somebody that I could support or believe in, and they just don't seem to be coming along. So I figure somebody's got to start it, and maybe I can make a difference. And
the hope of every candidate, maybe I can make a difference. But we wanted to know what makes this particular candidate tick. On a roadway near the dairy farm where he grew up, Carrig outlined a few of his basic beliefs.
And that's one of the things that brings me into this campaign, because I want to do something, because I look at my children and I see that I want the quality of their lives to be as good as the quality of life that I was able to have, and I can see right now that it's going downhill. When we were on this farm, my father worked, my mother worked here, and basically she didn't have to go somewhere and work at a factory. Now she works at a factory. My father and mother both work. He works for the city of Little Falls. She works for a factory down there, where they used to work for themselves and had a nice living, and they were their own bosses. And that, to me, is what freedom is. When you have to work for someone else for a wage that they decide that you're going to make, and they make all the decisions in your life. It's what I call corporate feudalism, and that's what we have in this country today. If you look at it, 0.1% of the corporations in this country own 60% of the corporate assets. So it's a very small number of people that control basically everything.
Carrig believes that control extends to elected officials through corporate campaign contributions. He reasons that those who are elected are unrepresentative of the people.
You know, if you look at the Senate, there are no small family farmers. There are some corporate farmers on the Senate. How can these guys don't have any idea what goes on here, the sweat and the tears that went into a life like this, and how can they possibly represent that type of thing? When John Dyson talks about buying out the cocaine farmers in Bolivia, I mean, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Here we've got a $2 trillion debt, half of which we've produced just in the last 5 years. We're producing $200 billion deficits every year, and they want to start putting the rest of the world on welfare.
Carrig, who says he never enrolled in any political party, is not just critical of Democrat Dyson. He targets Republican D'Amato's campaign theme of delivering for New York.
He sees that this state is his responsibility, and he's down in Washington fighting for money for this state and fighting for things for this state, and that's how he sees his job. And I see it differently. I think that this nation is like a family, and each state is like one of the children. And what we have to do is kind of compromise. It's just like you would with your family. If this one needs shoes or that one needs shoes, who needs it the worst right now? And we say, well, we're going to have to sacrifice. Everybody's going to have to sacrifice a little bit so that we can have the things that everybody needs without destroying the family budget.
That's Carrick on the federal deficit. He also has a skeptical view of the other hot issue in Washington, tax reform.
I think what's happening is that the middle class has gotten smart. They've hired some accountants and some lawyers, and they found out, and there's an awful lot of books on the market as well, that tell you where the loopholes are. And so people have started to structure their lives so they can take advantage of those loopholes. And that's one of the things that this tax reform is all about, is to take away the loopholes. Who's going to get the tax considerations? It's going to be those same people that have always had them. And we're just going to have to learn to play the game all over again.
Certainly, Carrick appears to be a thoughtful man who has definite opinions and, he believes, reasonable proposals to offer. But his campaign never got off the ground. Why? He refused to take campaign contributions because he didn't want to be beholden to anyone. He quickly learned the consequences of that decision.
If you don't have money today, you're not a candidate, is the way it's dollarocracy. That's the way it works out. And money decides who the candidates will be. And I would like to see that change, and I would like to do something about changing that.
Carrick's thoughts on the subject of changing campaign finance laws aren't new. He would lower contribution and spending ceilings so that everyone could have an equal shot. He thinks that might solve the way the money problem affects media coverage.
And what I find is that when I do get exposure and when I talk to people, that I'm very well accepted. The problem is, as you say, without having money, number one, you can't do the political ads so people don't know who you are, and number two, the media doesn't want to cover you unless you're one of those people with a lot of money. And that's, to me, that's the problem. I've always felt that it's the media's responsibility in a democracy to give the information they need to make a choice. How can people go to the polls and make a decision when they don't even know who the candidates are?
Without media and without money, Carrick said he quickly gave up the idea of gathering 20,000 signatures statewide to get on the ballot in the primary. Instead, he'll keep trying to get attention to convince people to write in his name in November. He concedes he might be tilting at windmills.
Well, we considered calling ourselves a Don Quixote party, but I don't know if that would be a smart move. It's true that I am somewhat idealistic, but as I said a few minutes ago, people create reality. Reality is not something that is just imposed on us from outside. People can change.
To give you an example of what Dave Carrick was up against, he had to gather 20,000 signatures statewide. He had a couple of options, not being part of a political party. He could travel to the 62 county boards of elections and copy their lists of registered voters that contain all the information that's required by law, or he could buy the lists. That would have cost him $800 to $1,000, $1,000 more than Carrick had to spend. Care to run for political office? That's it for this week on Inside Albany. See you next weekend.
I wish he would observe the law and let the people vote. The law is very